Acclimatization or acclimatization, also called acclimation or acclimatation, is the process in which an individual organism adjusts to a change in its environment, such as the change in altitude, temperature, humidity, photoperiod, or pH, allowing it to maintain performance across a range of environmental conditions. Acclimatization occurs in a short period of time, hours or to weeks, and within the organism's lifetime, compared to adaptation, which is evolution, taking place over many generations. This may be a discrete occurrence. For example, when mountaineers acclimate to high altitude over years or days, or for hours or days, or may instead represent part of a periodic cycle, such as a mammal shedding heavy winter fur in favor of a light summer coat. Organisms can adjust their morphological, behavioral, physical, or biochemical traits in response to changes in their environment. What is acclimatization? The term acclimatization refers to a social process where an organism adjusts to changes in its environment with respect to temperature, altitude, humidity, pH, light, salinity, pressure, and presence of certain chemicals. Organism adjusts to changes in its environment with respect to temperature, altitude, humidity, pH, light, salinity, pressure, and presence of certain chemicals. The term acclimatization comes from the word acclimatize, meaning to adapt to a new environment, climate, or area. Acclimatization can be defined as follows. Acclimatization is defined as a process where an organism adjusts its behavior or physiology in response to changes in its environment. These phenotypic traits are often noticed within a short period or within the lifetime of an organism. It also is reversible across most cases. What is acclimatization? The term acclimatization we just learned. Then the key difference between adaptation and acclimatization is that adaptation is a gradual, long-term, and irreversible process shown by living organisms in order to adjust to a new environment over a long period of time. While acclimatization is a rapid, reversible, and temporary adaptation process shown by the living organism to changing environment within a short period of time. In contrast to changes that occur during growth and development, acclimatization, as defined above, refers to an adaptive change that is reversible and conditions return to their former condition. Acclimatization does not leave a lasting impression upon the genetic mechanisms of acclimatized organisms. The adaptations of populations to change that affect evolution by the change of genetic capability is different process from the acclimatization of an individual. Acclimatization in humans, high altitudes. One of the best known examples of acclimatization in humans can be observed when traveling to high altitude locations such as tall mountains. For instance, if an individual hikes to 3000 meters above sea level and stays there for a period of 1 to 3 days, they become acclimatized to 300 meters. If the same individual hikes to 4000 meters in altitude, then their body has to acclimatize once again. Some of the changes that takes place during acclimatization to the high altitudes involve increased production of red blood cells, increased pressure in pulmonary arteries, thereby forcing blood into sections of lungs which are usually not used during normal breathing at higher altitudes. So increased depth of respiration, increased depth volume of breath. In some cases, individuals suffer from acute mountain sickness when ascending to elevations of over 3000 meters from sea level. However, is a very common and mild condition that can be overcome if the body is given enough time to acclimatize. The reason why this happens is reduced air pressure at high altitudes as well as lower oxygen levels. Lower oxygen levels. One of the most severe forms of mountain sickness is called a high altitude cerebral edema, where fluid builds up in the brain. This is a life threatening condition and requires immediate medical attention. What is acute mountain sickness or AMS? The physical distress occurring from difficulty in adjusting to lower oxygen pressure at high altitudes is called an acute mountain sickness or AMS. The occurrence of acute mountain sickness is dependent upon the rate of descent and individual susceptibility. Many people will experience mild AMS during the acclimatization process. Symptoms usually start 12 to 24 hours after arrival at altitude and begin to decrease in severity about the third day. The symptoms of mild AMS are headache, dizziness, fatigue, shortness of breath, loss of appetite, nausea, then some other aspects like disturbed sleep and a general feeling of malaise. And symptoms tend to be worse at night, and when respiratory drive is decreased, mild AMS does not interfere with normal activity, and symptoms severely subside within 2 to 4 days as the body acclimatizes. As soon as symptoms are mild, and only a nauseous ascent can continue at a moderate rate. But if the symptoms become worse, then losing altitude as quickly as possible is the only solution to avoid a threatening situation. What happens at high altitude? The concentration of oxygen at high level is about 21%, and the barometric pressure average 760 mmHg. As altitude increases, the concentration remains the same, but the number of oxygen molecules per breath is reduced. At 12,000 feet, there are roughly 40% fewer oxygen molecules per breath. In order to properly oxygenate the body, your breathing rate, even while at rest, has to increase. This extra ventilation increases the oxygen content. So, this extra ventilation increases the oxygen content in the blood, but still not to the sea level concentrations. Since the amount of oxygen required for activity is the same, the body must adjust to having less oxygen. The time that our body needs is the time required for our body to acclimatize, and continuing to higher altitudes without proper acclimatization can lead to potentially serious, even life-threatening mountain illness. A number of changes take place in body to allow it to operate with decreased oxygen. The depth of respiration increases, pressure in pulmonary arteries is increased, forcing blood into portions of lung which are normally not used during sea level breathing. The body produces more red blood cells to carry oxygen. The body produces more of a particular enzyme that facilitates the release of oxygen from hemoglobin to the body tissues. All these things take time, and therefore it is said not to go too high too fast. Which are the changes happening? The depth of respiration increase. Number of changes, and the depth of the respiration increase. The pressure in pulmonary arteries is increased, forcing blood into portions of lung which are normally not used during sea level breathing. Then the body produces more red blood cells to carry oxygen. The body produces more of a particular enzyme that facilitates the release of oxygen from hemoglobin to the body tissues. All these things take time, and therefore it is said not to go too high too fast. Mountain sickness will be happening, otherwise will take place. So acclimatization at high altitude, various physiological readjustments and compensatory mechanisms in body that reduce the effects of hypoxia in permanent residence at high altitude. It is done by a great increase in pulmonary ventilation, increased diffusion capacity of lung, increased ability of tissue cells to use O2, increased vital capacity. Respiratory alkalosis, increased erythropoietin, increased number of RBC, increased blood volume, increased cardiac output, then increased vascularity of peripheral tissue alkaline urine, then cellular acclimatization, increased mitochondria, then increased cytochrome oxidase, increased myoglobin. Cerebral blood flow, respiratory hypoxia response, O2 delivery, heart, blood. Effect of hypoxia on blood, increased RBC count due to increased secretion of erythropoietin from JGA of kidney, extraglomerular apparatus of kidney. On CVS, increased heart rate, force of contraction of heart, cardiac output, blood pressure due to reflex stimulation of cardiac and vasomotor centers. On respiration, increased pulmonary ventilation due to chemoreceptor reflex following increased PCO2. On digestive system, loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting. On kidney, alkaline urine due to increased erythropoietin secretion. In CNS, depression, apathy from general loss of self-control, talkative quarrelsome, ill-tempered, rude behaviors, then disorientation, loss of power of judgment, memory impaired, fatigue, lack of coordination, and acute severe hypoxia, sudden loss of consciousness. Deep diving. Similarly, deep diving sea divers also have to acclimatize when ascending from the certain depths. This form of acclimatization during deep sea diving involves a process called decompression, where the dissolved inert gases are eliminated from diver's body by pushing at several stops during the ascent to the water surface. The tissue rises when the diver starts descending, which leads to increase in hydrostatic pressure as well as ambient pressure. Moreover, the breathing gas, which is used with the dive, is supplied at ambient pressure. This means the gases begin to dissolve in the diver's body. On depressurization during ascent, the dissolved gases from bubbles inside the body often cause debilitating pain. In severe cases, it can also cause coma or death. And acclimatization of heat. It can be extremely important to acclimatize people to extreme heat. Examples of people requiring acclimatization are soldiers on duty in tropics and miners working in the 2-mile deep cooled mines of South Africa, where the temperature approaches boil temperature and the humidity approaches 100%. A person exposed to heat for several hours each day while performing a seasonably heavy workload will develop increasing tolerance to hot and humid conditions in 1 to 3 weeks. Among the most important physiological changes that occur during the acclimatization process are an approximately twofold increase in the maximum rate of sweating, an increase in plasma volume, and a diminished loss of salt in the sweat and urine to almost none. The last two effects result from increased secretion of aldosterone by the adrenal glands. Acclimatization of the sweating mechanism to heat role of aldosterone. Although a normal unacclimatized person seldom produces more than about 1 liter of sweat per hour, when this person is exposed to hot weather for 1 to 6 weeks, he or she begins to sweat more profusely, often increasing maximum sweat production to as much as 2 to 31 hour per hour. Evaporation to this maximum sweat can remove heat from the body at a rate of more than 10 times the normal basal rate of heat production. This increased effectiveness of the sweating mechanism is caused by change in the internal sweat gland cells themselves to increase their sweating capability. Also associated with the acclimatization is a further decrease in the concentration of sodium chloride in the sweat, which allows progressively better conservation of body salt. Most of this effect is caused by increased secretion of aldosterone by the adrenocortical glands. Adrenocortical glands, which results from the slight decrease in sodium chloride concentration in the extracellular fluid and plasma. An unacclimatized person who sweats profusely often loses 15 to 13 grams of salt each day for the first few days. After 4 to 6 weeks of acclimatization, the loss is only 3 to 5 grams per day. Acclimatization of heat exposure, improved metabolic efficiency, increased aerobic metabolism, and decreased heat wasted in making ATP. Then sweating promoted at lower core temperature, rate of sweating increased from 1.5 to 3 liter per hour. Stroke volume increase, cardiac output increase, heart rate decrease, aldosterone secretion increase, NA in sweat decrease from 35 to 5 MEQ per liter. Potassium retention, have thick fur coats, grow thicker fur in the winter time, shed their winter coats in the summer. Then soil acclimatization, reduce nutrient application, reduce water frequency. Light acclimatization, low light, less growth, less need for nutrients, less water need. Acclimatization is the process of adjustment in the environment by the organisms when any changes occurs in the environment. The changes may include temperature, pH, humidity, altitude, rainfall, etc. It is the capability of an organism to adjust in the environment even after it has undergone a drastic change. The acclimatization in the environment occurs in a span of very short time period, but it may take longer even several generations to adapt to that environment. The acclimatization of organisms results in the theory of the survival of the fittest. Those organisms who can adjust will be fit for living longer, while those who cannot adjust in a new environment will become extinct. Organisms may show changes in their morphological, physical, biochemical, and characters in response to the change that occur in the environment. The process of acclimatization is shown in the large number of variable species, but how can they acclimatize to the new environment is still unknown to the researchers. Many parent plants also show acclimatization, as they may even survive at freezing temperature. The human may also show acclimatization, as during the hot summer season the amount of sweat and urine excreted outside the body decreases, so we store fluid to prevent dehydration.